A quick update on the channel. In the last video, I mentioned I want to move to a new video release schedule. And starting with this one, you're going to see a video from me every Monday. That's going to be the staple, so we're not going anywhere. We're still going to make great content about photography, color management, product review like I'm about to do in this video now. But throughout the week, I'll release more videos as things get released, software get released, so on and so forth. If it's a slower week, you may not see me until the following Monday, so just an FYI there. And I know that this is the week Apple is releasing the iPad Pro and the new iMac M1. I have those on pre-order and they are en route to me right now. They're already in shipping status. However, I don't have any of the Apple pre-release devices, so there's no embargo on me. You're not going to see a video on those products this coming week, but you'll probably get it the following week. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for that. All right, with that being said, this is a little bit on the delay side, but let's have a look at Apple AirPods Max and what I think about it. I'm Art, and Art is right. Before we start, subscribe if you're new and hit on the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I upload cool new videos like this. Apple AirPods Max. It has been out on the market for some time now, and it's just got my pair into use, so I thought I would give you a review from my perspective. Now, there's a lot to be said about these, and first of all, what I like to do is give you a quick overview of the landscape for active noise cancellation headphones. So we have companies that sell in extremely small volume. For example, Shure, Denon, Master and Dynamics. Also, Sennheiser, I believe, makes some, although Sennheiser just sold their headphone units to another company recently. Microsoft does make one. They make the Surface headphone and is in the second generation right now, Surface Headphone 2. I play with that. I think it's really interesting the way how they do the ring that moves around. And if we move into more the mainstream product, we would be looking at the Bose 700 or the Quiet Comfort one, which is their previous generation. Both of those are really great headphones. And pretty much the king in the market right now for active noise canceling headphone is the Sony XM series. I know Sony makes other series, but their XM stands at the very top. This is the XM3. And I have played around personally with the XM2, this XM3 that I own right now. XM4, there was not that big of a difference for me to really justify upgrading to, so I didn't do that. With Bose, I have played with them in the past, so I don't have an active pair to compare them right now. So I'm going to give you my perspective from that. And then when we move into the high end, we have Bowers and Wilkins, for instance. They make really great speakers and headphones. They have an active noise cancellation pair, and apparently I say high end, their price is not really super high end. It's around $350, around where Bose is, where Sony is, so it's about normal range there. But if we really push it into like the high end design company, we're looking at B&O, Bang & Olufsen, to which their speakers or their over-ear headphones starts at around $500, and it ranges up to $800 and sometimes even more depending on which pair you're looking at. So that's interesting there. I also want to mention two luxury good companies. I know there's some other ones too, but some of the ones that really pop into my mind is Montblanc. For example, they released the MBO1, which I don't even know if it's an active product they're selling anymore, but that's their active noise cancellation headphone. I don't know who makes their product. It'll be interesting to know. So if you have those bits of information, share them in a comment below. I'm curious. But here's the thing. I think Montblanc make great pens. They make great watches, leather goods, all those other things, just not electronics, not headphone, not digital watches. So I'll take a pass on that one as much as I like their product. The other company that we have to talk about is Porsche Design, which it's all about engineering, right? And great design. So Porsche is a little bit more transparent where they tell you the company that they have collaborated with. Porsche has this Space One noise cancelling headphone, which they collaborated with KEF or KEF, which is a British speaker manufacturer. In fact, I have a pair of their LS50 wireless to do audio monitoring for any of the video I'm recording at my editing station. So their speakers are really good. Another headphone companies that we have to mention when we're talking about this is Beats. So Beats does have headphones and they do have active noise cancellation one. However, listening to Beats, it sounds really good, but a lot of time with Beats headphone, you get a lot of that bass emphasis, and the way how they tune the sound is much different. I prefer something a little bit more neutral, so the AirPods Max, the Sony XM, the Bose tends to work better for me. Now, when we're comparing this, all the ones that I mentioned so far are active noise cancellation, and there are many other brands out there. I know that some try to compare these AirPods Max to a high-end speakers that require a DAC, a preamp, all those things, and you gotta wait for like the amp and everything to warm up first before you can really listen to good sound. I don't think that these are necessarily comparable with that because these are totally different devices. Those are generally passive headphones that requires all these other components for it to work. These are really convenient devices, and what it really comes down with these is that they are audio engineered devices. Pretty much the way how I would look at this is think about Bose. So Bose make a lot of speakers, but Bose never market themselves as a speaker company. They always market themselves as an audio engineering company. And it's the same thing with these AirPod Max and including the Sony XMs as well. We shouldn't look at this as necessarily just a speaker, even though it is performing that function. What Apple is really doing here is a lot of signal processing, a lot of audio engineering to do the noise cancellation, to do the wireless signal transmission, to minimize any type of latency, and to also emphasize the sound. They're doing a lot of signal processing and engineering on top of this. So that's just the one thing I want to mention is that comparing these to the analog headphones, you can, but I don't think it's necessarily the most appropriate comparison. All right, that being said, the two big companies out there in this market is Sony and Bose. We already know that, and I already mentioned that. So depending on who you are and how keen you are with sound, there are going to be point of diminishing returns. So for instance, for me, the Sony XM3s, I can still hear the difference between this and the AirPod Max. However, moving up a little bit further, I haven't tried too many high-end headphones, and to some extent, I can hear some of the difference. I prefer really great speakers more than headphones, but when it comes to headphones themselves, what I'll say is this, like, I'm at some level of an audiophile, but I'm definitely not to the level of an audio engineer, a musician, where they listen to every single thing. I know one of my friends is a musician, and he's much better at, hearing all these little tones than I am. So with every one of us, there is going to be a point of diminishing return. And to me, my point of diminishing return is these AirPod Max, and I'm really happy with them. All right, so based on listening so far and with that information out of the way, how do I think the AirPod Max sound? I think they sound really great. And when I'm listening to sound with vocal, comparing this AirPod Max to the Sony XM3, one of the big difference I can hear right now is that the vocal on the AirPod Max is a lot clearer, a lot cleaner than the XM3. XM3 have a tendency to be muddy, and I'm not 100% sure if this is muddy because of the Bluetooth transmission or it's just the way how the audio is being processed on here. Now, when I say muddy here, it's relatively good already, but in relation to the AirPod Max, it sounds a lot more, I would say like muddier, is not quite as clear of what the AirPod Max can do. With the AirPod Max and Apple Audio Engineering, when you're using this to make a call, the voice is much clearer too. So what you're about to hear right now is a recording that I did on the Memo app on an iPhone. You can hear the recording with the AirPod Max and also recording on the Sony XM3. And you'll be able to delineate really clearly which one is the Max because you can also hear the sound or my sound much clearer. So this is a sound recording from the Apple AirPod Max. Listen to the clarity in my voice, and we're going to compare this to the Sony XM3. This is a sound recording on the Sony XM3, comparing this to the AirPod Max that you have heard before. So now that you're able to compare the audio, AirPod Max is definitely much clearer, but Apple have also put in many more microphones and signal processing for those microphones compared to the Sony XM3, so that is a big difference there. If I have to make a call, I would rather use the iPod Max rather than the XM3. There are a few other advantages that the AirPod Max have, especially if you're in Apple ecosystem. For example, moving between different Apple devices is really seamless. I can just pick up my phone and it will just automatically go to my phone. It just makes moving and migrating from one device to the next super easy. And also the setup process is much easier on these AirPod Max too, because you pull it out of the box, you press a button, you bring it close to your iOS device and it links, and it automatically links to all your iOS devices because you're all signed into iCloud. With these ones, I have to hold down the power button for a while to turn it off and then hold it down again to turn it on, but keep holding it until it gets into this Bluetooth pairing menu so I can pair it my phone and different devices. And with the XM3, it can only pair with one Bluetooth device at a time. So if I need to switch between the phone to the iPad, vice versa, I have to shut it down, then relink it again, or I can try to go to the Bluetooth menu, but I find that shutting it down is just much quicker and much simpler to go through the process, even though it takes a while. So the integration. from that perspective, it's much easier. Spatial audio is another feature that makes the AirPods Max stands out from the rest of the crowd. Because of Apple vertical integration, they can really make that happen seamlessly. So with spatial audio, if you haven't used that before, essentially if you have something playing on your iPad or on your phone, if you just set it there in one location, you look at it, the sound will come pretty much clear on both sides. But the moment you turn your head, so for example, if I turn my head to the left, you're going to hear that the sound is really coming on over just on the right ear. And if I turn my head to the right like this, you're going to hear that the sound's moving to the left ear, but pretty much is keeping the sound centered to the device that you have. That's really cool. However, it doesn't necessarily simulate 5.1 or 7.1 surround sound or anything like that. The benefit of that, though, it does make the audio dialogue in a lot of the movies and TV shows a lot clearer, but there also are some limitations. So your hardware, your iPad, your iPhone need to support spatial audio. A certain generation of these iPad Pros no longer supports that. So that's kind of like a bummer. And that's also the reason why I upgraded from my iPad Pro 2 12.9 inch to the third generation, which is the one I have here, in order to get that spatial audio. The other thing is that spatial audio works well in Apple TV app, especially with Apple TV Plus subscription. However, moving to other apps, the experience can be hit or miss. For instance, Netflix does not support that. And if you have your media library on your own, for example, if you run a Plex media library and your files are encoded in 5.1 or anything like that, spatial audio doesn't work in Plex. So there are some give and takes there, and it really depends on what you're looking for. But personally, I really enjoy that, especially for the dialogue. It just makes it much clearer. Another feature that I really love about Apple AirPods in general, and especially the AirPods Max, is transparency, because it really pumps in the environmental sound in there, and it does it really clearly. This is when you compare them to the Sony XM, which the sound coming in can be really muddy. The other thing that the Sony XM does have is that you can put your hand up above one of these cups like this, and it will allow the sound to come in. This is giving you the opportunity for you to have a conversation with someone. Personally, I never found that works really well. So if I'm on an airplane, if the flight attendant's approaching to ask me a question, usually instead of just putting my hands over the ears like this, what I usually do is just take this down and put it around my neck so that I can listen and pay attention to them. With this, I would still do the same thing depending on what I'm doing. If I'm sitting in the exit row, I'll take this down. But if I'm just having a conversation, or if I'm just ordering a drink or something like that, then I think that the transparency features on these will work just fine. Now, for someone like me, I'll give you my personal experience of this. I love going to airports. I love flying, but going to an airport can be an anxiety-inducing experience for me because there are a lot of ambient noises in the airport. It's really loud, lots of announcement, and people are just everywhere. And especially when it comes time before boarding, everybody just gather around the gate. I mean, it's just a terrible experience. The last time I went through an airport, which has been quite some time now, I remember having the AirPods Pro, which is the in-ear headphones, the one with noise cancellation, with me, and I was using that in transparency mode. And the nice part about transparency on Apple product is that you can really hear the sound clearly, but it cuts down all the ambient hums, and that really serves a calming effect for me, at least for me anyway. So if you're like me at all, that would help out a lot with the device. All right, moving on, noise cancellation between all these devices, the AirPods Max, the Sony XM3 is really good for the most part, and they're pretty much, I would say, like really close or on par with each other. Sure, you're not going to get too big of a difference there. The one thing, though, that AirPods Max does have advantages over Sony and all of Apple products is that it has a sensor on the inside, so it knows when you have this on your head or in your ears and when you don't. So the moment you take this off of your ears, whatever you're playing on your device just pretty much stops, right? With the Sony, it keeps playing and you just have to manually engage the pause and everything. So that's just the one big difference there. And the nice thing too is that when you have this off, for example, if you pick up your phone or something, it's not still trying to pipe the audio to here. It just works as a normal phone, where this one, you really have to choose the audio source or the audio device that you want to use when you're having a phone call, because it's, Bluetooth and is passive. So it's still thinking that the Bluetooth is an active connection, where this one, because of a sensor, it's much smarter. So that's another thing that you may have not considered too, but it's a big advantage there. So let's jump in and talk about the ergonomics of this a little bit. The buttons on the AirPods Max are very easy to use. I really like this digital crown idea that I have taken from the watch to adjust the sound, and it also works at a button that you can press. And I think that the interaction is really awesome. The buttons here for noise cancellation in front, the only other button on there, it's really easy to use. So the one great thing about this AirPod Max is that the moment you put it on your ears, and if you put your hands up to your ears like so, you know exactly what you're pressing on. You know exactly what you're holding or what you're adjusting because the buttons are different enough that you can just delineate it by feel. When it comes to the XM, well, that's a different story. You can't really tell. There's two buttons on the left ear cups, but the problem is that they're so close in proximity to each other, so you have to remember the position. Are you pressing on, for instance, this lower one here, or are you pressing on the upper one for noise cancellation? And you don't want to accidentally turn this off, even though you can just turn it on again. It's no big deal, but it's just one of those things. About the play control and everything, I like the interaction on the Max much more because this, what you have to do is have it on your ears like so, and you would use these touch gesture, which when you have noise cancellation on, it's like you're poking yourself in the ear all the time and you do hear those interactions. So I don't think that this is the best implementation for gesture control and all those things as on top, where I really like these much more, and you're not constantly poking your ears, you're just pressing these buttons, and the way how they have designed the spring and everything on a button just works much better. So the thing about these is that your ears would still sweat with these, even though it is kind of a breathable material compared to the Sony one, which is like a faux leather. But I guess if you're in a winter climate, this can act as like an earmuff and warm your ears up. But if you're in a hot climate, it still does make your ears sweat. And that's just something that I notice after using a while. The ear does get warm, and this is pretty much the same throughout. So not that big of a difference there. So while we're on ear cups, let's talk about the ease of replacement. With the AirPod Max, what I can simply do is pull these out. They're magnetically attached. I can get different colors, or I can just get the same color when these wore out, and it makes it super easy to just literally go in and replace these ear cups, right? On the Sony one, it's a little bit different story. You can replace these, but they don't come out very easily, and there's a way how you can replace them, and you can order parts for it, but the ease is not there. When you really look at the engineering between these two products, though, you can really see how Apple really put in a lot of effort into making a really great engineered product. For example, these pistons are probably one of the most overly engineered piece of technology ever in a headphone because they move really smoothly. You can just adjust it to precisely where you need it to be. And the thing is this, unless you intentionally go in to push or pull these, they don't move around. I get through these headphones in my bag and they don't move around. And that's how great they are. They have really good, resistance to any of these type of movement, but they just make it really awesome. On the bottom of the stem there's kind of this spring mechanism that built the headphone out so that allows you to kind of, you can see there, move around the head a little bit more. And the only one feedback I have about this is when I try to do this and put it on my head, sometimes I feel like the bottom doesn't seal quite as tight and I have to push the bottom in a little bit more, but that's my personal feeling of that. With the Sony one, you don't get that, but you also do get these plastic metal clacking to adjust the headphone on your head and everything. And the premium feel of the Apple product, I mean, to me, that's just worth the extra premium price that Apple is charging over Sony. But that's personally for me, and I'm really a texture detail creative person, so having all these coming together works really well for me. Speaking of the weight between these two, on average, what you're really looking at with the AirPod Max is that it's usually about a third to 1.5 times more than the Sony headset. But the thing is this, once you put them on your head, I have tested this out in a variety of conditions. I don't use this for exercise, obviously, but walking around the house and everything like that, or taking it outside and walking around, this tends to work really well. So how does the AirPod Max fit if you're wearing glasses? Well, I have two pairs here to show you an example. So if I'm wearing this pair that has a curvature around the leg, you can feel a little bit more that the AirPod Max and memory foam is kind of pushing around this area a little bit. But after a while, the memory foam does kind of conform to the shape a little bit more and you don't feel it anymore. If you have a glass that is a little bit more straight on the leg, you're going to feel that less, and you're going to feel a little bit less pressure when you put the AirPod Max on initially. The AirPod Max uses the same lightning connector that I use to charge my iPhone, so I guess one less cable to carry. But this is also where it becomes a disadvantage for the AirPod Max. For instance, when I travel, a lot of times I'll do some filming or I'll do some project. The Sony XM works really great because it has this 3.5 millimeter headphone jack at the bottom. And what I can do is literally use the included 3.5 millimeter headphone cables and literally do audio monitoring from what my camera is capturing. With the AirPod Max, I really can't do that, and what I need to do is get an adapter. So Apple makes two versions. They make the shorter one, the Lightning to 3.5 millimeter female, that costs around $9, or they also make a full-fledged cable that is close to 4 feet, and that is a Lightning to a 3.5 millimeter male headphone jack. So depending if you want just a little short adapter or if you want the entire cable, you can do that. The entire cable one is $35, and I wish that Apple would have included the $9 one. That would have been helpful, where you can use your own 3.5 millimeter headphone jack cable. And the longer cable, I wish that it was actually cheaper than $35. So, I mean, just because they didn't include that, and this headphone is carrying a much more premium price, I would have just loved to see that included. So it just makes life a little bit easier. Now, this is going to affect one more aspect too. If you fly domestically, not a big deal. Most of the time, I just use the iPad anyway, and the in-flight entertainment. I mean, if you're flying JetBlue, most of the time the screen sucks. If you're flying some different airline, it just really depends. If you're flying Southwest, forget about trying to get a TV screen in the back of your seat. But if you're flying internationally, those airplanes generally have what they call an in-flight entertainment, IFE, that requires you to plug in your own headphones, and you can certainly use noise cancellation. So that's where I definitely need the adapter, or I need to get the cable in order to really use this headphone on the airplane with their in-flight entertainment system. So some limitations there that I don't really like about this, and that's kind of one of the downside about not including an adapter. It's not like you cannot go get one, but it's just one extra barrier to doing something. So if you're getting this to use on a plane, especially if you're flying internationally, do have at least one of those cables or adapters, or the adapter with another 3.5 millimeter cable with you, so that you can use the IFE on an airplane. Like I said, Sony comes with everything, and it's also cheaper. One last thing I want to cover about the AirPod Max is the case, and it seems to be such a controversial topic. And yeah, it is this strange case and everything, but you know what? After using it for a few days, I really like it. And I think that it does the minimal that it needs to do and get the job done really well. This is going to go on the contrary from everyone else and what they're saying. Now, is it the best design case? Probably not, but it gets the job done. So for instance, I can have this and literally just put in my AirPod Max, put this in a bag, and now my AirPod Max is pretty much protected. So I don't have to worry about the aluminum or anything getting scratched. I mean, granted, it doesn't protect the AirPod Max in its entirety, but you know what? I'm okay. And it also puts the AirPod Max into sleep mode, and it works really well. Comparing this, for example, to the Sony XM2, XM3, or even just XM4, they all come with a case, which is really cool. But I'll tell you this right now, this case usually either stays at home or it gets put into a check bag, because I don't put this in my backpack because it carries a lot of bulk. You may say like, yeah, you know, when you fold the Sony headphones in, they become really small. So this is kind of a overview comparison between each other when you fold them. And generally the Sony headphone would go into the box or the cases just like this. In fact, let's open this up and try to fit the XM3 inside. So if you can see there, this is pretty much the way how the XM3 would fit inside the case itself, and this is in comparison to the AirPod Max. With the AirPod Max, what I do like though is that even though it doesn't fold quite the way how the Sony does it, there is some space here, and my little bags that I carry inside my backpack can still go in between there. So I don't know, this to me works really well. The only thing that I would comment about this is the material they use. It feels, you know, like one of their silicone case, the fluoroelastomer, very similar to the Apple Watch, although it does feel a little bit different. But these are pretty much dust magnets. So when you have dust on them, you definitely feel it. And I absolutely hate that feeling. So that doesn't really work well for me in that regards. But otherwise, I really like the case and I can't complain about it. Another thing I want to mention about the case really briefly is that when you open this up and you pull the AirPod Max out, the only thing I don't really like this is when the AirPod Max is stored this way, as you can hear that sound. This is pretty much just literally the AirPod Max kind of like hitting each other right there on the aluminum portion. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, you're almost there, Apple. You could have done just a slightly better job on that one. Granted, though, if you have the Sony XM3, when you have it folded, these would hit each other all the time, which is the reason why they created that divider in the case to avoid these two-part hitting. But I mean, these just, I think, like hit a little bit more, and you can hear that right there. So that's just the part that I don't really prefer about it, but otherwise is okay. So the conclusion for this is that overall, being that this is the first generation over-ear headphone from Apple, they have done a really great job with this. I think that overall, they have thought a lot of things through and it makes a lot of sense. Granted, they have been doing audio engineering devices for their AirPod much longer than that, and also the HomePod devices. So the sound, I expect it to be good, and it is really good. And I mentioned this already, but when comparing it to the XM3, the sound is definitely clear on this one, and I can definitely hear a difference. So here's the thing. If you are in Apple ecosystem, such as myself, I have iPad, iPhone, I use Apple product, and yes, I do consult with people on PC. So I'm technically bilingual, but if you are already in Apple ecosystem, these are definitely a great device to have if you're looking for a good over-ear noise cancellation headphones. If you're on Android, or even if you're on Apple, but you want to save some money, I would just look at the Sony XM series, because even just the XM4, Sony have them on sale literally all the time from different outlets. And if you get the previous generation, for example, like XM3, then they do become cheaper in price too, because it's a previous generation product. So anyway, if you're looking for another brand other than Apple, I would look at Sony, and then I will look at Bose in that order. Hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Give this a like, subscribe if you're new, hit on the bell to be notified, and until next time, in Art We Trust.